So this is both incredibly impressive and also really unnerving at the same time, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. The Swiss watch industry is always talking about innovation, and they say that word so much it's pretty much lost all meaning. We're supposed to believe there's innovation in the Rolex Yachtmaster because now it comes in titanium. Well, things are changing fast because not only is this new watch made from titanium, it's also one of the thinnest ever, was the lightest watch in the world, plus, and this is insane, it's also curved, including the movement. Yet it's half the price of the titanium Yachtmaster. And that's not even the biggest surprise this watch has to offer, the part that's got me unsure what to think, so let's go take a closer look at the new Behrens Ultralight 20G. What is the Behrens Ultralight 20G? It's the second part in a two-part series to make the lightest watch in the world. There's the 11G, the lightest version in carbon fibre, and this, the 20G, in titanium. You'll have probably figured out that the names refer to the weight, specifically without the strap, and yeah, 11 grams for a watch makes it the lightest in the entire world. Or made it, because like with the thinnest watch, another brand, Ming, has come along and snatched that record at 8.8 grams. Kate Moss can relate. That Ming costs a whopping £17,000. The 11G is better but still £11,000. The 20G, however, is £6,000. That's cheaper than the basic Hesselite version of the Omega Moonwatch, for one of the thinnest and lightest watches ever made. And in case you're unfamiliar with how much 20 gram weighs, it's less than a bag of crisps, or about 4 sheets of paper. It's so light that when you're wearing it, yes, thank you Ned Flanders, it really does feel like I'm wearing nothing at all. Stupid sexy Behrens. But it's not just about making it thin and light. This watch is a concept for more than just dimension. It's a technical concept too, and a brand concept. The whole thing is testing to see how you feel about this watch. Behrens has thrown pretty much everything they have at it to give it every opportunity to be a success. And like the sun, the more you look at it, the more it leaves a lasting impression. Let's start with the foundation of this watch, the caliber BM02. I'd say at 6,000-ish, we'd be comfortably looking to expect a movement not based on an Etta or Solita, and we've got that. A movement not based on an Etta or Solita. I could have phrased that better. But I don't think at this price we'd anticipate something like this. The BM02 is an entirely bespoke caliber built in-house by Behrens with a three-dimensional architecture you'd more likely expect to see in a Richard Mille. Now, I know people will question the value proposition of Richard Mille. Are they overpriced? Are horses scared of their feet? But in no world do we think that something like an RM35 should cost just £6,000. Okay, so some of you do, but that's just spite pricing. The reality is that to find a movement with this kind of architecture, you've got to be willing to lay down some decent bucks. Try it and see. Browse around and find something like this for less than, say, £15,000 that's not just a typical round movement with some dressing on top to make it look more unusual. I'll wait. Pause the tape now. The entire thing is built on top of the trapezoidal caseback that determines the overall shape of the watch, formed of layers that carry the 38 hours of power from the mainspring top center down to the balance at the bottom and out to the ancillary displays. The bridges that keep all this from rattling around loose inside the watch are skeletonized into more spindly trapezoids to keep the weight down and give the watch an overall look and feel of Patrick Bateman's hi-fi. What you don't get from Richard Mille, or most anyone else however, is the curve. To keep the 5.8mm thick case as close to the wrist as possible, it bends by 15 degrees from tip to tail, and with the strap bolted straight into the 42x38mm case, and of course the fact it weighs as much as a mouse's fart, it really does feel like there's nothing there. Like, absolutely nothing. It's uncanny. You'd spend the whole time checking to make sure it was still there. Usually movements mesh gears together on a single plane and change planes using pinions, but instead Behrens literally has each gear meshing with the next at a subtle angle to carry the curve through the watch. I don't think I've seen that outside of a 250,000 Grubel Forsey. With Behrens, there is no spoon. The caliber BM02 still has a few more surprises left to give. With just 38 hours of power reserve, a power reserve indicator is a welcome addition tucked up top left in the watch. The teensy crown even gets a little rubber ring to make the daily task of winding it all the easier. But as of yet, there's been no mention of the time, because a cursory look at the watch suggests it simply doesn't tell it. A watch without the time is as useful as fingerless oven gloves, but it does also add unnecessary layers that make the watch thicker and heavier. So the solution Behrens have chosen is to go full regulator and separate the hours and minutes into two discrete dials, left and right of the balance. And not only that, but to make them as readable as possible, they're scaled up into quarter circle displays by way of a retrograde complication. If you're not familiar with a retrograde, it's where the display doesn't complete a full circle, instead returning quickly back to the beginning when it reaches the end. You get that twice here, with the minutes on the right snapping back every hour, and the hours on the left taking the leap every 12 hours. Like I said, Behrens have really gone to every effort to make this watch unlike anything you've ever seen before, and that includes the finishing, which with its textured surfaces flanked with machine polished bevels, again feels very on par with Richard Mille. Once more, Richard Mille is hardly a paragon of finishing excellence, but it does exist and people do buy them. Real, human people apparently. On a more standard movement, this finishing level I would say rivals the £10,000 mark, with the volume of work needed, given there are more bridges than Hamburg, pushing it more towards £15,000 to £20,000. From a daily usability perspective, it would be anticipated that the Ultralight is just too delicate, but that's somehow not the case. It's hardly waterproof at 30 meters, but not entirely useless, good for a cheeky hand wash and a skip in the rain with a loved one. The titanium is grade 5 too, so it'll take some knocks before marring, unlike its softer grade 2 cousin. It's not good to mix cousins. Perhaps the only point to note is changing the strap. There's no access to remove it without taking out screws in the caseback, which Behrens suggests should be done by them. Best hope the strap lasts then. Nothing good will come of a broken rubber. This is an enormous amount of watchmaking for the money, and so I don't think there's a viable competitor for this watch this side of £20,000. Not even the Ming, which although very impressive, is still built on a modified ETA base. For this level of design, function and finish, not to mention originality, the Behrens Ultralight has as much competition as the '96 Chicago Bulls. How does it do this? There's been a quiet technological revolution that's made it possible, and it's happened somewhere we might not have expected: China. It's happening across the field. 1 minute, China was the global supplier for cheap parts and poor quality copies. Now it's starting to rival global leaders at their own game at a significantly reduced cost. Take Tesla for example, who are dominating the electric car game. Their biggest challengers aren't the likes of Toyota and Volkswagen, but BYD, who offer a high-performance S-Class rivaling luxury electric car that doesn't look like a smashed crab for less than £50,000. It's Chinese. Then there's Geely, that's bringing a Model S competitor for just £25,000. Never heard of Geely? They own Volvo, Lotus, Polestar, have shares in Aston Martin, and even own the company that makes London taxis, also Chinese. Coincidentally enough, Elon Musk has just made a visit to China, presumably to be mean in person because he couldn't tweet them. China has been home cooking these high-tech luxury solutions domestically for a while now, and they're starting to get out there. Behrens is one example, bringing everything you thought you could never afford for a price that perhaps you can. How do I feel about this? Honestly, I don't know. I'm a big supporter of international watchmakers and generally putting the willies up the Swiss, and am a badge-wearing enjoyer of the likes of Japanese Grand Seiko. I mean, once upon a time, Japanese watchmaking was synonymous with poor quality and bad performance, and now we have the Kodo. It's probably a lot to do with the fact that all those cheap, terrible knockoffs all came from China, and so it's hard to disassociate those with this. But even Switzerland learnt how to make good watches by producing bad, unlicensed copies of British, French and even German watchmaking. They say that to become good at something, first you should copy someone who is better. They didn't say to sell those copies under the guise of that original creator though. People are also generally hesitant about China. You're never too far from a news story about China's relationship with the wider world, and I'm sure you have your own opinions on it. With a global reliance on China as a supplier, it's certainly not a clear-cut matter. But what about this watch, and Behrens in general? Well, it's just a matter of time. What you need to understand is that this will be the worst Behrens watch from this point forward. They're only going to get better and better. At what point does it become good enough and cheap enough to push watch buyers over the edge? Everyone has their tipping point, and for you, this Ultralight might just be it already. I want to know what you think about Behrens and the Ultralight and Chinese watchmaking in general. Would you buy something like this? If not, what would it take? Or is it something you'd never go for? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to support what I do, please join my lovely Patreons via the link in the description. Thank you for watching, and remember, if you've got some rubbish and can't be bothered to take it to the recycling centre, package it up in an Amazon box and leave it out front, and it'll be gone in seconds. Goodbye.